A federal grand jury has declined to indict Senators Mark Kelly, Alyssa Slotkin, and 4 other Democratic lawmakers over a video they made last fall reminding service members of their duty to refuse illegal orders. This marks the latest rebuke of the Trump administration's push to prosecute the president's perceived political foes. The video featured 6 Democratic lawmakers, all military or intelligence veterans, warning service members about unlawful orders. President Trump has called the message seditious and said their actions could be punishable by death. Joining us now, opinion columnist for the New York Times, David French, and investigative reporter for the New York Times, Michael Schmidt. Michael, just first of all, anything more you can add to this? Yet another setback where they try and bring something against folks that they feel have disobeyed or not been loyal to the president, and then the courts say, what are you doing?
We've got a pattern here. This is now the 3rd instance in which the Justice Department, at the urging of the President of the United States, has gone to try and bring criminal charges and failed, and in dramatic fashion. What I wonder is whether this is sort of the Justice Department's way of trying to deal with Trump, in the sense is like, okay, you want us to go do this, we're going to go ahead and do this, and now you don't have to blame us, you can blame this grand jury. Look, you had the Comey case where they struggled initially to get the indictment. They got it on one of the charges, but they struggled on the other. The James case, which they went repeatedly to the grand jury and failed to get an indictment on. And then you now have this. And to me, the significance of it is this, is that if Donald Trump cannot invent and make up criminality about the people he doesn't like, that is a major check on his power. I realize that that's a very unusual statement to make. This is something that we've never really confronted, certainly in recent American history. But if Trump cannot create criminality, that's a significant thing. And we're seeing the buds of that in what appears to be a pushback from the judicial branch.
So, Michael, this is out of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, led by Jeanine Pirro, obviously a longtime close ally of President Trump, thinking she's doing him a favor. But as you lay out, again, this only hurts him when they can't even get an indictment to begin with. I'm curious, did Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary's repeated messages from 2016 where he said exactly the same thing, that you should and must defy illegal orders, did that come up at all, or did they not even get that far?
We don't know what came up in the grand jury room, but if you look, there was some statistic I saw last night that there was something like, these are called no true bills, when a grand jury comes back and says, we're not going to bring this case. There's this old saying, you could indict a ham sandwich, something that we thought was true and is apparently not. In one of the years, several years ago, there were 6 no true bills in like the entire Justice Department in a year. We have seen many more than that, whether it was with the sandwich, the person who threw the sandwich, or the James case that I was talking about and such. So the number of them is larger, and there's something going on. Another thing that we've never seen before, where grand jurors, people that are picked for jury duty, that are on grand juries, are doing highly unusual different things. Are they doing that because they don't think the evidence is there? Are they doing that because they don't trust what the Justice Department is saying? Do they do that because they think they're doing it at the behest of the president? There's a larger factor at play here that we don't have full visibility into, because what goes on inside a grand jury room is secret. But in terms of trying to understand it, there's something going on at the level of the average citizen that they are either not taking the Justice Department seriously, or the Justice Department is not bringing enough convincing evidence. And just last thing on this, the whole thing Trump says about the cases against him is that they were, cooked up, and, this is a plot and a hoax, and, whatever he calls it. At the end of the day, all of those cases obviously made it past grand juries, and they made it past judges. And some of them went to trial, and in one of them, he received a conviction. So if you think about the sort of counterfactual of what happened to Trump and what's happening here, in the minds of some, does it increase the validity of what Trump faced?
So, David, certainly these grand juries are providing a bit of a check on President Trump's power and his retribution campaign. But there has been, this is still a painful process potentially for people involved. These lawmakers here, we talked about, as Michael just mentioned, FBI Director Comey, Letitia James. We currently right now, Don Lemon and another journalist are, still facing charges for doing their jobs in Minnesota. So that's even if they can't have convictions, this is still an onerous process and an abuse of power.
Well, there's an old saying that the process is the punishment. That what you go through if you're a target of a federal investigation, nobody wants to endure that. Nobody wants to. And Mike's point is very well taken. When you look at the way grand juries are actually beginning to function according to their constitutional role, which is to be a check. A grand jury is supposed to be a check. It's not very much of one. I mean, it's been generous to even call it a speed bump over the last many years. But now you're seeing when somebody does begin to encroach well beyond the bounds of their power, this check is rising up. But if we're counting on grand juries to save our republic,
right,
that's a big problem. This is impeachable stuff here. I mean, and just to put the extremism of this attempted prosecution in context, what's next? Is he going to prosecute the authors of the Department of Defense Law of War Manual, which includes the precise circumstances which service members must refuse to follow orders? And includes, as an example, shooting shipwrecked survivors.
Right.
That's an example in the Law of War Manual. So are we prosecuting those people? I hope the statute of limitations has run out on me. When I was a JAG officer in Iraq advising an armored cavalry squadron, I went through the circumstances in which law orders are unlawful and must be disobeyed. This is basic stuff here.
Right.
And you're trying to indict somebody for this? I just fear that a lot of these stories, and this is an incredible scoop, a lot of these stories are just getting lost in the wave of every other story that comes next.
There's
exactly.
so much happening, and that's, I think, part of the strategy, some might argue. You mentioned impeachable stuff. You would need some Republicans to go with that, and that's doubtful.
Right.
Or a successful midterm for the Democrats, Katty Kay, so that perhaps they have more power to act. Katty.
Yeah, I mean, clearly that is one of the things that President Trump is worried about in the midterms, and we see him already sowing the seeds of kind of disinformation around the midterms, saying that they're going to be rigged, and with the visit down to Georgia by Tulsi Gabbard, I think that's all part of this picture. But, Michael, can I ask you a kind of broader question? I had an interesting conversation with Senator Chris Coons the other day, and he was saying that there have been hundreds of cases brought against the Trump administration by attorneys generals around the country, and they've won something like 75% of them. But actually, to David's point, we're not hearing about those cases because there is so much other news taking place. What is it's a kind of 30,000-foot question, but what is the parallel track of the way the justice system is working and potentially holding against the attacks upon it by this administration? How is that holding up? How is the justice system holding up?
It's funny. I was talking to one of these litigators who's been dealing with the Trump administration, defending someone against the Trump administration. And what they said was that at the district court level, amongst the judges, they have just basically lost patience and trust in the Trump administration, that they don't take them at face value. They don't believe they're acting in good faith. And because of that, the Trump administration at the district court level has run into a lot of problems. Now, the problem on the civil side for those trying to hold Trump accountable is that it moves very slowly. Those things can get appealed. They go to the appeals court level, then they ultimately go to the Supreme Court level. And if it's not the most pressing matter on the face of the earth, it can take some time. And I think the thing that I have found striking in all of this is that while the civil process, where these attorney generals bring cases and such, has moved, and it has moved against the Trump administration, it has moved, not certainly at the pace that many have wanted it to. The criminal justice system, in response to the Trump administration, has moved far more swiftly. And again, we have never seen the criminal justice system tested in the way that it's been. But the Comey and James indictments were tossed out. You've seen these grand juries acting in the way that they have. And it appears like, and the legal beagles probably could have told us this before, but certainly we haven't experienced it like this. The criminal justice system moves in a swifter way because of the enormous protections that a defendant receives in this country. And there's a speed and a clearness and a clear-cutness to that has been different than what we've seen on the civil side.
All right. Investigative reporter at the New York Times, Michael Schmidt, thank you so much for coming in this morning with your reporting.